Welcome to the Tipton County Museum Online Academy. This program is part of our Enhancing Classroom Education program. I'm Barrie Foster. I'm the director here of the Tipton County Museum. I'm also an artist and an art teacher, and we have many other art videos and art history videos in our online academy. We also have nature videos, genealogy videos, and history videos, so please check those out. Today's program is ahead of her time, Hildegard Von Bingen. Hildegard was a nun, a visionary, a writer, a composer, and a healer. Now, we don't know what Hildegard's last name was. The word von means of in German. Hildegard was German, and Hildegard von Bingen actually means Hildegard of Bingen because that's where she lived. Hildegard was born in Bermersheim, Germany in the year 1098. She was the 10th child of noble parents. She was tithed, and at age 8 she went to live in a monastery. Now, what does that mean? You might have heard the terms tithes and offerings when you go to church. Before they pass the plate, the word tithing means to give 1/10 of your income. Tithe means 10. It's a Latin term. And because Hildegard was the 10th child, her parents, when she was born, they dedicated her to the church. So she lived with her family until the age of 8. Then she went to live in a monastery. Her father's name was Mechthild of Merxheim-Nehet. Her mother was Hildebert of Bermersheim. We don't know what her parents' last names were. We just know that's the names they used. When I was 10 years old, I moved with my family to Paris, France. And I learned about medieval history. I learned about European history from my teacher, Mr. Harmon. And it was magical for me. I loved it. So the medieval period is also known as the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages. And it began in approximately the year 500 and ended in about the year 1500 in Europe. So Hildegard was born in the year 1098, so she was born in what was known as the medieval period in European history. It began at the fall of the Roman Empire, and when we think of the Roman Empire, we think of Julius Caesar, people like that. Most people during the medieval period were very poor and could not read or write. They didn't have schools like they do today. And the medieval period ended with the Renaissance period. The Renaissance period was also known as the rebirth or coming out of the dark. People believed life should be enjoyable then. Art and education became very important. And we have 3 other educational programs regarding the Renaissance period. One of them is on Leonardo da Vinci, one of them is on Lorenzo de' Medici, and the third one is on Galileo Galilei. So be looking for those programs as well. In the year 1113 AD, Hildegard actually became a nun. She was 15 years old. She had lived in that monastery since the age of 8. And by the time a girl was 15 years old, she was considered a grown woman. Most women back then were married and had children. Because she became a nun, she never married and never had children. A nun is a woman who has dedicated her life to God and lives in either a monastery or a convent, and that's what she was doing. Her mentor was a woman named Jutta, and Jutta was the sister of Hildegard's father's boss. Jutta taught Hildegard to read and write, and when Jutta died, Hildegard became Mother Superior at the age of 38. And you can see in this artwork, it's a carving from a church in Germany, and you can see Hildegard as a young girl, and you can see her touching hands with Jutta. Hildegard was well known and well loved throughout Germany. She was authorized by the Pope to preach in public, and that was a really big thing because back then women weren't allowed to do anything at all. They had no rights like we have today. They couldn't vote, they couldn't keep their own money, none of that. Hildegard was considered very, very wise, and leaders often wrote to her asking her for her advice. Here's the monastery where she started her journey as a nun. And the monasteries are basically houses attached to a church. This is what's standing of it today. You remember, this was in the 1100s, so it was a long time ago. This was the church and the monastery at Mount Dizio-Bodenberg in Germany. Now, that was actually a monastery that had a lot of men in it that were monks, and they were like nuns, only they were men. They had devoted their lives to God as well. Well, Hildegard didn't like the way the women, the nuns, were being treated. She felt that they weren't being treated fairly. So she raised enough money, and she had another monastery built. And it was built in 1150. It's not standing today, so we don't know exactly what it looks like, but here's a drawing of it that someone did back at that time. We can see it looks beautiful. We can see some hills in the background. Almost looks like a castle. Then in 1165, she had a third monastery built. It's not standing today. This one was in Ebbingen in Germany. And that building decayed. It was destroyed, but they rebuilt a new convent on it. And this is a picture from modern day, and there's vineyards around it, and it looks beautiful. People often go there today to learn about her and to see where she lived. Hildegard was a visionary. What that means is she had visions beginning at age 3. And here's how she describes them. Heaven was opened, and a fiery light of exceeding brilliance came and permeated my whole brain and inflamed my whole heart and whole breast, not like a burning, but like a warming flame. And in this artwork, you can see the flames coming down into her brain. She revealed her visions to the world at age 43 because God told her to write down what you see and hear. So she never told anyone at all. And finally, at age 43, God said, write this down. And in this artwork, you can see the picture of Hildegard, and you can see God's head right on top of hers. And he's telling her to write down her visions. When she resisted writing down her visions, she became sick, and sometimes she would have to be in bed for days. Scientists today believe that her visions may have been the result of migraine headaches. But we don't know because she's gone, but that's just what they believe. Hildegard was a writer. She wrote 3 volumes of religious books. The first ones were called the Scivias, which means know the way. The second set was the Liber Vitae Meritorum, which means the moral life. And the third was Liber Divinorum Operum, which means God's salvation. So she was a nun, and she was writing religious books. All in all, she wrote 9 books, 70 poems. She even wrote a play, and the play is still being performed today. I have a copy of it. It's beautiful. She was a composer. She wrote chants for female voices, and that was something new because back then the chants were all for men or the monks. And oftentimes in today's society we think of chanting monks, medieval chanting, that type of thing. But she was the first one to write the chants for the female voices. She composed songs called the Symposia. And in this artwork, she has written the words and the notes to her music. And you can see that it looks quite different from the music today. But there are scholars out there today and musicians that can read this music and perform it, and people are still performing her music today. And at the end of this video, we're going to play a little bit of her music, so please hang on so you can listen to it. It's beautiful. She wrote 72 songs in all, and she was the first composer whose life we know about. Here she is in a room in a monastery, and she's in front of an organ. Their organs back then were quite different than the instruments we have today. And you can see she's playing it. She may be singing. And through the window are the monks looking in at her and listening to her playing this beautiful music. Hildegard was also a healer. She studied botany, which is the science of plants. She used herbs, natural medicines, and stones to heal people. And the stones probably are the same thing what we think of today as minerals. She was one of the first people to believe that your diet affected your health. Today we know that to be true. But back then, they didn't know that, but she knew that. She wrote 2 books that were very famous and can still be found today. The first one is Physica, and you can see in this picture, here's a copy of it in print today. And the other one was Causae et Curae. She wrote those books between the years 1151 and 1161, and they're still found in print today. And keep in mind, she was writing these in Latin, most likely. She died in the year 1179 at the age of 81, which was a very, very old age for people back then. Generally, they died in their 40s or 50s. She became a saint in the year 2010, and in Germany, they celebrate the feast of Saint Hildegard every year on September 17th, which is the anniversary of her death. And most people who celebrate the feast either buy or make these special cookies. These cookies are from a medieval recipe. You can still find the recipe today. It's kind of like a molasses, ginger snap, sugar cookie, that type of thing. So thank you for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this. I find her to be very fascinating. And please listen now for the music, and we hope to see you at the Tipton County Museum.